Hello, this is Peterson. Please pardon my voice today, because I have something important to tell you regarding martial law. This came from secretsofsurvival.com. Okay, let's say that the scenario that seems so possible actually happens. The United States is attacked with a weapon of mass destruction. A major U.S. city, possibly Washington, D.C., goes up in a mushroom cloud. Don't think that can happen? FBI Director Robert Mueller is reported to have confirmed the claims made by FBI consultant Paul Williams that Al-Qaeda sought nuclear weapons with a hope to detonate 7 nuclear weapons in 7 U.S. cities. Paul Williams calls it, and the name of his book, The Day of Islam, the Annihilation of America and the Western World. In such a situation, several cities would be attacked through the use of nuclear technology in close succession. In other words, a nuclear bomb might go off in New York, then it might be followed by another blast the next day, or even only hours later in Washington, D.C., enter martial law. Such a situation would almost certainly result in a period of martial law. With so many threats and theories about America's collapse, the U.S. government is likely to take extreme steps in a last-ditch effort to hold on to power as all hell breaks loose across the land. What martial law might look like in the United States. First, martial law has been looked at in several films, etc. Along with this, no one really knows exactly what it would mean, as the way it would take hold would differ depending on the circumstances. But under the aforementioned Muslim terrorists targeting 7 major cities with nuclear bombs and then attacking suburbs outside the explosive areas, we could expect at least some of the following. A curfew before dark would no doubt be imposed. The reasons are obvious. If the military is in an area, they want to ask as little questions as possible when they see someone outside, and in darkness this feeling would be tenfold. Further, when the military is in charge, fun will be less paramount. In other words, the government and soldiers won't want to deal with people out after dark. Employment would continue soon. Initially, all activity would likely cease if a nuclear bomb were to be set off in or near an area. That said, once the threat of injury due to fallout was lifted, the government would want to get people back to work as soon as possible. In other words, we all need work to survive, and that's exactly what the country would want to do, survive. Rations and tribunals under martial law. Rations. The military just might end up in charge of rationing out food and supplies if needed in the area during a period of martial law. Military tribunals. Don't expect a standard jury and trial during such times. A trial? Yes, in a way at least. Basically, members of the military, a military commission, would meet to determine a lawbreaker's fate during a martial law period, and this would happen swiftly. Further, the public would have to expect much more severe penalties for lawbreaking, particularly for those offenses that could in any minor way be tied to violence or, of course, terrorism. In other words, if you were found to be a terrorist under military rule, well, let's face it, the government would probably pass a law putting these people to death. And remember, during such times the military would not act like local police. In other words, they would probably give possible lawbreakers only one shot before shooting on sight, if that. Security. With security, the #1 directive: expect that leaving a city/area by car would be an ordeal. We're talking akin to getting into Canada, actually a lot worse. Thus, travel beyond to places of employment would be severely restricted, possibly by permit only. Detention camps. Some might not like to hear this, but detention camps would clearly be warranted if such a thing were to occur. Back on November 13, 2001, the president issued a military order involving the detention, treatment, and trial of certain non-citizens in the war against terrorism. Basically, this order said that the government could detain non-citizens reasonably suspected of being a terrorist or harboring them, as long as they were treated humanely in these detention centers. Further, there would be a trial by military commission. In other words, much like the military tribunals spoken of earlier. Beyond this, it is quite clear that the United States has considered such detention situations, as Halliburton's former engineering and construction subsidiary has a contingency contract with the Department of Homeland Security to construct detention facilities in the case of national emergency, according to WorldNet Daily. An ICE spokesman, ICE, being the former subsidiary, further indicated that the detention centers would be used in the event of a mass migration crisis. Along with this, it is very hard to know how many people might be detained in such a manner, but guess on nearly every Muslim with any known tie whatsoever to terrorist states being locked up until things can be sorted through. Thus, taking everything into account, we're probably talking about tens of thousands. The problem with detention: obviously under such circumstances the United States would have to detain several non-citizens, as was noted earlier. Further, if we're going to be honest, many of them would be Muslims. Again, this was noted earlier. But consider this: what if some of our own citizens were helping terrorists? Read more at http://www.secretsofsurvival.com.